Testing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. All right, we're back. We're back on the block, taking stock of the movies of yesteryear at Backlook Cinema, the podcast. I know I said that last time. I didn't have time to change it this time. Sometimes I'm not as creative with my opening statements as I'd like to be, but you know, it happens. My name is Zoe, your host, that's Z-O or Z-O, if you're cinema fans overseas. This is the 91st episode. Thank you for downloading or streaming. We really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about the movies of yesteryears that we loved to watch from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And if you like what you're about to hear, then take some time out to offer some support by giving us a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can also share our show on social media. I will give you the links later in the show, and they'll be available in the show notes. Now, as you know, as I sometimes mention, and sometimes I forget to mention, that we usually have these talks after me and my son Zach, we both watched the film, but our schedules didn't come together. So we didn't watch this film and together. So I watched it by myself and he hasn't watched it. And I'm not sure if I want him to watch it because we're going through some things right now. And maybe this film is a little heavy. It's definitely heavy. I had mentioned something on Twitter about doing this show about this movie. And I got one response that kind of says, I don't want to talk about that movie because, you know, it makes me cry. And I was like, well, yeah, you will weep. You will weep in watching the movie that we're going to talk about. But more on that later. For right now, I should say, we are going to have a word from Beth and Kirsten, and they are from the Made for TV Movie Podcast. If you find them, or if you want to find them, just you're having a hard time finding them, just give them a goog, as they say, at MFTV MC Podcast. And now, Beth and Kirsten.
Hello, everyone. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kirsten, and we are the hosts of the Made for TV Movie Club podcast. Beth, we've been friends for a long time.
We sure have, Kay, since before Rachel kissed Ross for the first time.
It's true. And since we share a love of all things TV, we decided to team up to review our favorite TV movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
You don't need to watch the movie. We did that for you.
You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Deezer, and iHeartRadio.
And find us on our socials.
Join us in our Facebook group, Made for TV Movie Club Podcast. Follow us on Insta at made_for_TV_movie_club. Tweet us at TV Movie Club Pod 1.
Or give us a Goog at #MFTVMC Podcast, and you'll find us.
We'll see you soon in the clubhouse.
And we're back. And now, as I promised last week, we have two extremely special guests. At first I thought it was just one guest, and then I realized I'm getting two guests. I was like, all right, two for the price of one. I'm a champion. It's totally awesome. So if you haven't heard, if you don't know, now you're about to know, because there's a new podcast on Scene, and I want to share this podcast with you. So in order to do that, I have been able to bring on these next two guests. They have a mutual love of movies and have decided to join forces to start this brand new podcast called Watch Skip Plus. The Watch Skip Plus podcast. I fumbled that all out, but I'm getting through it. I'm working through it. I didn't do my vocal exercises. Please give me a break. The Watch Skip Plus podcast is started by my next guests, and they are Jose, also known as Cupcake, and Justin, also known as the Cinemasochist. Please welcome, put your hands together for the host of Watch Skip Plus.
All right.
Yeah, I love that.
It's amazing. Thank you. Thanks for that intro, Zoe. Thank you. We are so happy to be on.
Likewise.
Yeah, that was the best I could do on short notice. I try to make
No,
my guests feel welcome.
That was wonderful. Now I've got to live up to that.
We feel very welcome.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right. So man, I've been listening to your podcast. I couldn't listen to too many episodes because too many of the movies that you're talking about I haven't seen yet. It's like, no, don't want to do it. Don't want to get accidentally spoiled. Gonna have to go out and watch these movies before they're spoiled. But I did listen to 1,000 Years of Longing. That's what it's called, right? And
Yep.
then you did Bullet Trained. And I like both of the I like one movie more than the other. I like Bullet Train. I like Bullet Train more than I liked 1,000 Years of Longing. And I was it put me in after listening to your review, it put me in the mood to write a 20-page letter to you and responding to your review. But I hadn't gotten around to it yet. And maybe I'll edit it down to my head to maybe a page and a half, perhaps. And maybe I'll turn it into a blog post, but still.
I might need the rough cut of the 20 pages though. To
Right,
cut it down. I'm curious.
But
Yeah, or hey, we'll just have to return the favor. You'll just have to come on.
right, absolutely.
I thought he was going to say a 20-page paper, and I like to write, but I'm like, are we splitting 10-10?
Right. If you've been listening to or if you heard some episodes of Not a Bomb podcast, then you know what I'm talking about. They've been courteous enough to read a couple of my letters on air.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to be part of the conversation so bad. I guess that's why I have my own podcast and trying to be a part of the conversation. So as far as that is, so you got a podcast together. How did you two meet?
Justin, you want to?
Yeah, I'll do it. So it's funny you mentioned Not a Bomb podcast because the hosts of that show are mutual friends of us. Both Jose and I met through a podcasting community formed from the Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema, which is a podcast that just hit 600 episodes recently, which is mind-boggling. So we both came to that within at least some time in the past decade. And then there's a friend in Baltimore that Jose knows that I know, and that's how we were introduced. And then as we just became closer and closer over the years, we kept talking about doing a podcast. I put it on the back burner for a bit because I went back to night school to get my bachelor's degree. So I was like, well, let me do this before I overwhelm myself. But now that I am free of that burden, it was perfect timing.
You're officially a bachelor now.
Yes. Before it was just I was an amateur at it, but now it's like I'm a professional.
That's
yeah. So awesome. we did meet through that sort of online Facebook community of the Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema, and Troy and Brad, who run Not a Bomb podcast. I met Troy through our mutual friend in Baltimore, Randy, and then I was introduced to Brad. And actually, I did a Tough Mudder with Will, the other host of the Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema. There was 4 of us who all met through the Gentleman's Guide online, and we all went up to Pennsylvania and we did the Tough Mudder. It was pretty fun. It was crazy.
I was there, but only as a cheerleader.
Yes, he was an observer, so Justin got to watch us.
I went hoorah when I saw you guys coming by.
Yes, exactly. But a lot of us have always talked about starting a podcast because I think like you, we love to talk about movies so much, and Randy sort of was like, not really my thing, and then eventually with Justin's schedule freeing up, we decided to start Watch Skip Plus together, and we were really looking for a way to distinguish ourselves because there's just so many podcasts out there, right? And so we both came up with the concept of Watch Skip Plus. So Watch Skip is the grading system. We're either going to say watch it or skip it, and then the plus is sort of like a lifestyle bonus review that each of us will do before we review the movie, and that can be anything. It could be a movie, it could be a book, it could be like a concert or a stand-up comedian that you saw, or even just a piece of news or a trailer. And so that's why we're called Watch Skip Plus.
Oh, well, that's pretty awesome. What books have you been reading lately?
Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I am just about finished Very Naughty Boys, which is all about handmade films. Who started? It was George Harrison and I always forget the other guy's name. O'Brien is Dennis O'Brien, and they formed that. They were helping out when the Meaning of Life almost got canceled or lost its funding. They came in and then they started producing other films such as Mona Lisa, With Nail and I, and it's kind of all about how it starts off really hot, but then one basically wants to become almost American because it was a British film production, and that kind of sank them. So just the rise and fall of them, and it's a very interesting read.
Oh, so that's that's a nonfiction book.
Yeah,
and
a lot
about,
of I've noticed a lot of what I read nowadays. It's just nonfiction, whether it be about films or just I read one about Anheuser-Busch and how they were getting bought out in like 2008, and just all the craziness that some of it reminds me of the show Succession, which I'm sure inspired some of it. So,
oh wow, that's nice. I do like nonfiction, but I haven't read. I think it's been. I don't even read books anymore. I listen to audiobooks. So I think the last thing that I actually listened to was either about Alexander Dumas's grandfather, or it was about who's also named Alexander Dumas, or it was
Senior.
yeah, or it was about what you call it. It was something about the video game wars. I learned
Console Wars.
Yeah, console wars.
Yeah, that one's excellent. That one's really good.
not that particular book, but it was
about that. Okay,
right,
gotcha.
it was about that. I think it was more geared towards Nintendo. I can't remember. It's all a bit fuzzy now.
Yeah, there's quite a few around that time.
The only thing that I remember that I liked about the book is what that I learned is that when Nintendo came out with the game Donkey Kong, they were actually trying to make a Popeye the Sailor Man game, but they couldn't get the rights to it. So they rebranded it. They reprogrammed it a little bit, and they called it Donkey Kong. And they were worried about the copyright issue, and Universal tried to sue them, and they had a lawyer, and the lawyer was like, don't worry about it. I got you. If they try to sue us, not only will they fail, but we're going to sue them back, and we're going to get a whole bunch of money. And that is exactly what happened. Because as it turns out, Universal never trademarked the name Donkey Kong, King Kong. They never trademarked King Kong.
Yeah. And it's substantially different, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
there's enough
in Donkey
differences.
Kong, you've got a barrel. There is a damsel, but she's not a screen star, etc.
Donkey Kong does look different than King Kong in color, and
yeah, they're definitely close enough that like if it was even if they had changed the name, it's close enough to King Kong where they might have had a lawsuit, or they might have had a case, because this is back when DC could sue Charleston Comics over Shazam and win. So
yeah,
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Or I know Hulk Hogan was suing Marvel for a little while for the Incredible Hulk. Oh no, it was the other way. Yeah, Marvel was suing Hulk Hogan because Incredible Hulk Hogan, and they had to come to an agreement with that.
Yeah, they did, because when you look at some of the older playing cards, it'll say Hulk. It'll be a Hulk Hogan trading card, and it'll say Hulk is trademarked by Marvel Comics.
Yep. Yeah. And wasn't Shazam originally named Captain Marvel?
So
there's all of that craziness.
That they couldn't there was no lawsuit between Marvel and Charleston, and his name was Captain Marvel, and they had an entire Marvel family. This may have been before Marvel officially changed the name, because they used to be called something else, and Timely, I think they used to be called Timely Comics, and then they changed their name to Marvel. So it could be that Captain Marvel preceded that. So there's and he's called Captain Marvel up until like just recently. They officially changed his name to Shazam.
Shazam, right?
Because to avoid confusion with Marvel's Captain Marvel, since she made it to market before.
Exactly.
Zachary, what's his name?
Zachary Levi. And even if she didn't, like, they probably knew that the name Marvel would make people think it's a Marvel film, not a DC, just because of how the MCU is now.
Right.
So,
what are some of the unique challenges that you face since you started?
Honestly, I think it's just I don't know, Justin. I would say within 1 or 2 episodes, we got comfortable with each other and the
Yeah.
format. So I really think that this is really all just about, I guess, growing the audience and hoping to just get out there and communicate with listeners and maybe hearing what they want to see or what they would like for us to change. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's been much of a challenge other
No.
than, say, me learning how to edit
Yeah, I was
the
gonna
first
say,
time. Yeah.
which once you get past that, it kind of becomes second nature. And then maybe just, and we're already getting better with it, is just as film fans, we can get very sidetracked because you're like, oh, this guy was in this, and then you start talking, and that's just how we are in person, which works for the show. But I think we're getting better with knowing how to focus because we're getting more comfortable with, oh yeah, we're recording a show. I'm not like when I come down to visit and we're just chatting movies for hours on end. And
Yeah, it's definitely easier when you have somebody to talk to rather
yes.
than you're doing it by yourself. Because like, oh my goodness, I'm just talking into the void.
I used to do solo podcasting and I do not miss certain elements of it
Right,
because
right,
it was
right.
talking into a void. And yeah, it's easier having the co-host. So I'm loving that.
Right.
Yeah. It's good to
So
bounce comments off somebody.
right,
Most
right.
definitely.
Absolutely. So in listening to your podcast, especially Jose, your guest appearances on Not a Bomb podcast, you seem to be extremely knowledgeable. So why are you so knowledgeable? Why are both of you so knowledgeable about film? Did you study film? What's going on over there?
Justin.
I just became obsessed with it. I did take in high school a couple of years. We had a video production studio, so I took some of that, which made me one very much appreciate editing and sound mixing, and most specifically post dubbing. Because any film does that where they have to re-record lines or put it in there. And I remember I just could never get that down where it sounded natural. But yeah, it became an obsession. I grew up loving as a kid, like monster movies. And as I got older, just discovering more international cinema. And just once I discovered podcasting, and it was mainly because I worked third shift and I was throwing freight. So I just needed something to listen to. That's how I discovered GGTMC. And then it was just, you find this community and then you just kind of get crazy about it.
Right, right.
Well, I'm a child of the 80s, and like every parent in the 80s, my babysitter was the television. And so when we got cable, that's literally all I would do. I would do my homework, I would maybe call a friend or something, but every weekend I would just turn on HBO, Cinemax, whatever I could find, and I would just watch 2, 3, 4 movies every day, practically 2 movies every day after school, and I just devoured everything. And so sadly, I'm sure all of us have that one friend who's the walking IMDb, where somebody says, oh, I just saw this movie and it starred XXX. And then, I just like Rain Man start to rattle off, well, if you like that one, he's in blah, blah, blah. And that's directed by so-and-so. And that director also did this one. And this is great. And so, yeah.
Which
Right,
is
right.
great for a podcast co-host. I,
Right.
will tell you. I lean on him a lot when it comes to like directors of photography and
Yeah.
editors and composers.
Yeah, I'm not even
Definitely, but
cognizant of the DOP. I feel like I was never fully cognizant of directors until maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever. Because I mean, I knew who George Lucas was and I knew who Steven Spielberg was, but then after that, I might see a movie and I would like it, but I would never think about the director or the cinematographer or the composer or or any of the people who are really behind making the movie.
Well, I think, watching the Golden Globes, the Oscars, I think that's when, I started to really sort of pay attention to those things. And I've done community theater too. And, a lot of the times you go to a musical and you look at the program and, oh, he's been in this. And, oh, I remember that production. And I just thought, why am I not doing that with movies? Right. And so, it's been a long time coming and it gets trapped in my brain. So, that's
That's
where it
pretty
goes.
awesome. Yeah, because most people are like say Star Wars, for instance, they talking about Star Wars and they're like, oh yeah, the lightsabers are pew pew, and I love that. And somebody else would be like, well, Princess Leia is the strongest character in that film, right?
Right. And then there'll be somebody like me who's like, you know, the Sarlacc pit represents all of our anxieties. So, and when Han almost falls in, it's like he's giving in to his anxieties.
This is getting deep.
That's deeper than I want to go.
Yeah.
So, one more thing, Jose. I think I heard on one of the shows that you're Filipino.
Yep.
So you're second generation, first generation?
First generation.
Wow, that's crazy. It's funny because when I listen to you, you don't sound like my friends who are in Hawaii who are also Filipino.
Yeah. And they have the Filipino accent.
Right, just like that. And it was so when I first learned it, when you first was like, he's Filipino. It was like a culture shock all over again. Except it was reverse culture shock because I wasn't expecting it.
You know what's strange is my older brother has a trace of a Filipino accent. And I don't at all, which is it's super odd. I don't know how that happened. What's that?
He stole it from you.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Take him to court.
Took it from
me. Right. So it's a pleasure having you all on. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Stay tuned. We got more stuff coming up. All right, we're back, and we are going to talk about. See, I mentioned earlier that this movie is what is known as a tearjerker. We would call it that. We would give it its props and call it a tearjerker. And also, I also found out that this is not really a released movie. It's not really a cinema film that I usually do. I usually do movies that have been released theatrically, and this was a made for TV project. And here's the thing, I just found out today that this was a made for TV movie, right? But I am vindicated because this movie was released in Europe. So it has technically been released theatrically. And so I'm saved. So that means I could also do the Buck Rogers two-parter that's also a TV movie because that was released theatrically in Canada, and so was Battlestar Galactica, the original one that came out in 1970. So perhaps I'll use that loophole in order to feature those movies on this show.
I think it was released domestically. I think it was released domestically very shortly. It just people had seen it on TV, so they didn't come back out.
Right.
In the theater, so it sort of came and went.
Right.
So
yeah. So anyway, the movie that I am talking about is Brian's Song. So Brian's Song is it features Brian Piccolo and Gail Sayers. They're teammates in the mid-1960s Chicago Bears at a time when professional football still bears a certain amount of race-based segregation. The growing friendship between the white Piccolo and the black Sawyers, as well as their wives Joy and Linda, become a symbol of harmony during the civil rights era. That bond grows stronger still when Piccolo receives some shattering and unexpected news. And that was actually from Rotten Tomatoes. I usually get it from IMDb, but Rotten Tomatoes, this is a great write-up. I started to write one myself, but I was like, no, this is so much better. So this movie, it was released November 30th, 1971. It was produced by Screen Gems Television, and it has great reviews. So, and there was many things that was spectacular about this movie that we are going to talk about. So in this opening credit segment, I'd like Jose to start us off. Let us know who's starring in this movie.
Yeah. So starring wise, we have James Caan playing Brian Piccolo. Obviously, Mr. Caan passed away, unfortunately, recently, but he is probably most known for his roles in Dick Tracy, For the Boys, Bulletproof, and then, of course, Oscar nominated in The Godfather 1 and 2.
Yes.
Justin?
We have Billy D. Williams as Gail Sayers. He's definitely most known as Lando Calrissian in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. He has also provided his voice in the Lego Batman movie and was also in Lady Sings the Blues.
Yeah, I think before Batman, he was best known in Lady Sings the Blues, and there was this other movie that he was in called Mahogany. And
Mahogany.
just
Yep.
he's just the dude that got my aunt's heart's all aflutter.
Oh, I know. I know.
Imagine being like a 7 years old and your aunts are going, "Oh, Billy D. Williams," right?
Also, interestingly enough, he was the first Harvey Dent in the Tim Burton Batman.
Right.
And he took the role thinking he would eventually become Two-Face, and unfortunately, director
not so much
changed that when they did it for Batman Forever. So
right. So up next is Jack Warden. He played Coach George Hallis. He's been in And Justice for All, 12 Angry Men, and While You Were Sleeping, and I think 100 other roles.
Yes,
a very noted character actor.
Very, very noted. I knew him growing up because he had that show Crazy Like a Fox, where it was, I think his son was a lawyer and he might have been the investigator, but there was like spin-off movies. But yeah, I just remember his face from that TV show. Also in this movie, we have Bernie Casey, a former, I believe, a former pro football player, playing J.C. Caroline. He's known for Cleopatra Jones, Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, The Man Who Fell to Earth. I knew him growing up because I'd seen him in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, which is one of my all-time favorite comedies. And then of course he was UN Jefferson in Revenge of the Nerds as well. So I had a little catch up to play with his place in movie history and pop culture as a sports hero, from just starting from those movies.
Yeah, I always knew him from Revenge of the Nerds, since I'm not the biggest sports guy, and now recently Get You Sucker, which I finally saw.
Yes. Well, now you can watch. You can watch that episode that I did with some guest hosts.
We also have, and I might butcher the last name here, Shelley. It's either Fabers or Faberis. She plays Brian's wife, Joy Piccolo. She was also in Girl Happy, One Day at a Time, and the sitcom Coach.
Yeah, I believe Girl Happy is actually a movie, and she spent most of her time on television. And these are the roles that she's most known for, especially Coach.
Oh, yeah. I would have seen her in Coach. I was wondering why I recognized her, and I do remember that was the reruns would play on that a lot.
Right. Up next is David Huddleston. He played Ed McCaskey. He's been in The Big Lebowski, Blazing Saddles, and The Producers. You know what I'm remembering is that because this is a TV movie, they tend to just use TV actors. But in this case, they have a lot of people that have gone on to become big stars. James Caan was like transitioning to film when he got the script. I'm gonna read that later on in the trivia. So yeah, a lot of these people became big movie stars.
And rounding out our cast, we have Judy Pace. She plays Linda Sayers, and she is known for Cotton Comes to Harlem, The Young Lawyers, and Frogs.
Yes,
which
and
I believe I've seen.
Oh, you've seen that?
I've seen Frogs as well. I've got I kind of regret not going up to the Mahoning Drive-In, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from me, because they were showing a couple of years ago Frogs on 35 millimeter. I'm like, if there's ever a film that should be seen at a drive-in, it's Frogs.
Yeah, it's definitely Frogs. I think I went on a binge where I was watching like frogs, slugs, spiders, like all of that stuff. The animals gone wild.
All of the things that are eating humans like chopsticks that shouldn't be, right?
Ticks was another one.
Oh my god, yeah, Ticks. Yeesh.
And the director of this film, I love this man's name, is Buzz Kulik. Some of the stuff he is known for is To Find a Man. He did a two-parter on Kraft Suspense Theater, as well as Around the World in 80 Days.
Starring Pierce Brosnan before he transitioned to film.
Yeah, he's really good at taking actors like James Caan and like Brosnan, and helping them almost transition to superstardom and filmographies.
Right. This is probably before Brosnan was in Remington Steele.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when he was in that movie, they were seriously considering him for James Bond when he was in that TV show. And I love that show. I think I've watched most of those episodes.
It was so good. I feel like they had to wait to make Brosnan Bond because
Right.
everybody just remembered Remington Steele too much, and they would only see Steele when he was Bond. But his
And
run of
he was
his run
so
of
much
Bond was
like
pretty good.
James Bond in that show. It
Yeah,
was almost like he was prepping
completely.
for the role.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you have. Hopefully, I'm not over talking in terms of the trivia here, but Buzz Kulick, he's mainly been like TV. But there was a movie called The Pursuit of DB Cooper. He actually was. There was one director who was supposed to do it. They fired him. Buzz stepped in, and then he left shortly after they started filming. And now the movie is credited to Roger Spottiswoode, who's done other action films, but it's just odd. I mean, I know that happens sometimes with directors, but it's kind of like, what happened? Why did he leave the
Right,
project?
right.
You know,
Actually, that's
so
not in the trivia, so you're cool. You're good.
okay, good.
So that's extra information. That's awesome. So this movie was written by William Blinn and Gail Sawyers and Al Silverman. So Ben has done Fame, the TV show, not the film, Roots, the miniseries, and he created Starsky and Hutch. He's
Yep.
he's just television, and he's very good at it. And I can only
I'd
say
agree.
he's very good at it because he created Starsky and Hutch, which is what I grew up on.
Yeah, that's the progenitor of all of those, Lethal Weapon, all of the cop buddy movies.
Yeah, yeah.
It started with them,
Right.
Starsky and Hutch.
And apparently there may be a Starsky and Hutch reboot or do-over or something. Yeah, because
Well, I hope so.
of course there was a film and they took the comedy angle, and it wasn't that funny, at least
Yeah.
not to me. It wasn't like, but then they did 21 Jump Street, they made that a comedy, and that was super funny. So
Yeah.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
But I would really rather see the hard hardcore version of Starsky and Hutch. I mean, maybe not ripping out the jugular, but definitely some blood splatter. Some
Yes.
So this is based on the book I Am Third by Gail Sawyers and Al Silverman. So I've never read it, but it must be a fascinating read.
I also have not read it, but I am curious to read it after watching this.
The music is by Michel Legrand. He has 215 composer credits to his name, including the Thomas Crown Affair, and that would be the 1968 version with Faye Dunaway and Steve McQueen, Le Mans and Yentl. And then I do believe he did Brian's song. There was actually a song that went with this. And he was also Oscar nominated for writing the lyrics and the music for Windmills in My Mind, which is from the Thomas Crown Affair movie from the 60s. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk more about Brian's song, the theme to Brian's song. And that's fascinating because normally when you do a TV movie, this just outpaces your average TV movie because there's so many things that are done in this movie that are not done normally in TV movies, unless maybe you're dealing with like a fantasy or maybe a sci-fi television movie, something that they're going to maybe as a backdoor pilot to a regular series. So this is just a standalone TV movies, but there are some things that they've done with it that are like beyond what you normally see on television. That's why one of the reasons why it's so well renowned. So that's it for the opening credits. And if you're enjoying the show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, face masks, jerseys, and more at our website, backlookcinema.com/shop. And autumn is coming up, as I've been saying time and time again. As a matter of fact, by the time this broadcast hits your ears, autumn is here. So get yourself something warm at the website, and we'll be back to talk about our favorite parts. And we're back. We get to talk about our favorite parts of the movie, what we liked about it, what gave us pleasure, and the notes maybe we took. I have almost no notes on this movie, but then it was only an hour and 50 minutes long. So either one of you, start us off. What were your favorite parts of the movie?
Well, for me, and this was a first time watch. This was one I always knew about because it was the one film that made my grandfather cry. So I was always almost hesitant to watching it because you go in knowing you're going to cry. And I did. And those moments hit. But what really struck me, especially for a film that's only 75 minutes, was just how quickly you have this chemistry between James Caan and Billy D. Williams. Because the first scene is those two meeting up again after meeting a year prior. And Brian is, very talkative and he's saying, "Oh, I remember when we talked," and I would say stuff and you would just say, "Uh-huh." And then it just cuts to Williams is going, "Uh-huh." And it's just immediately it works. And it stood out to me because in lesser hands, that could have just fumbled, not to use the pun. I legit didn't try that. It just came out. But here it just felt so natural and like, okay, I 100% believe these two. And for a movie that moves so quickly, that could have been a problem because when you get to those emotional moments, it might not connect because you're like, oh, do I really feel these two characters? Right off the bat, I was like, no, I believe these two as having a friendship, a yin and yang that just immediately hits, and that just kept getting better, especially when you got to the hijinks they had in the hotel rooms, at the cafeteria. I immediately liked those two together.
Oh yeah, the hijinks started immediately. Like when they first meet, he Piccolo sends him on into a prank, right? He pranks him right away.
The stuff with the telling him the coach has the bad ear,
right.
So he keeps trying to move to the right ear. That had me laughing quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah, I just like Justin said, it's really that chemistry is what really sells this picture. And even for something that, I mean, I can only imagine that even when it aired, it was probably rather controversial. I mean, the basis of the story is essentially that the two of them were the first like interracial roommates at the NFL. So roommates being like, obviously they're training and stuff. And so they were housed together. And even though, we're coming out of that sort of like segregation and they're mixing black men with other nationalities on the football team, and they're sharing a locker room, there is still that tension out there. But what I think is great about the movie is that, just like Justin said, they do keep things moving. It's serious, but it's not so deadly serious that it's like an after school special that it's like, hey, let's not be racist. You know what I mean? Like
right. They're not saying it out loud.
Exactly.
It feels genuine with how they're approaching it.
Right.
Absolutely. It feels genuine, and their chemistry really sells it. And I was struck by the fact that it is a TV movie and they're flagrantly throwing around the N-word, which, I mean, even just watching it now today, right? I'm like, my ears are burning. I'm like, oh, James Caan is saying the N-word.
Right.
Do this. But
and it was part of the joke. It's like it was I don't want to say it was safe for him to say it, but I want to say that I think that people will understand the context, especially in that time, because the context of how and where he was saying it, that was the most important part. And that's why it worked with him saying it then and there.
And especially with their chemistry too, because they built off of that camaraderie of like almost, laughing at the fact that he even said it because he thought it would rile him up just to, help him out. It's just like, I can't believe you said that, man.
And then, that was, and the movie, again, there isn't like this beat afterwards where it's like, okay, viewers, they just play it as it is. It's two guys who know each other. They've been through a lot together, and the one says the N-word, and then they just laugh about it because they know each other, and they know he knows it's not coming from a place of power or lording over him. They're friends, and they know this. They're joshing with each other.
What makes it work is that when he said it, that's what he was trying to do. Like he was trying to. So the scene that we're talking about is so Sawyer's the black football player. He gets hurt, so he has to he doesn't break his leg, but he like strains his knee or something like that. So he's basically out of operation. He can't play football until his knee rehabilitates. And so Piccolo basically just comes over his house. He sets up some exercise equipment, and Piccolo's determined that Sawyer's is going to get better and he's going to be there. And so at one of these training sessions, you know, Sawyer's using the exercise machine and he's supposed to be doing 10 reps and he does 8 reps and he can't do anymore. It's like it just burned so bad. And then that's when Piccolo, he calls him the N-word. And then and then Sawyer's laughing about it. And he's laughing, and then he calls his wife down. He's like, where's the wife named Joy? I can't remember.
Yeah.
This is Joy. Pick just tried to call me a nigger.
And it's like she has that awkwardness too, and then she's laughing because she realizes why it's funny.
Right.
Exactly.
Like he tried to, but it doesn't work. It's not. It doesn't work coming from you. It's not going to work coming from you. Right. So that's why that scene works so well.
Yeah. And I mean that's just, it's the heart of it, and that's why you end up having the big guy cry, is because you care about these characters even for something so short. And you know, when he ends up getting the cancer and then there's 2 surgeries, and you know, I will say it was a little odd that they slipped in the whole like where he was at the hospital and he got the operation and a little girl got the operation.
Yeah.
And then they were sort of like, oh, she wants an autograph. Oh, I'm sorry, she's dead. And it was kind of like, huh? And then it cuts to a football game. So then it was like, yeah, I don't know why they inserted that. But...
And what was so weird about that scene is during the other heavier moments, the score is quieter to let the drama go. But that one had the after school special, like dun dun dun,
yes,
and it was just like it is. And I think the idea was just to show the severity of the situation, but like it's so jarring that it kind of does, just like, especially with that score. Even I was like, wait, what?
right. And then it ends with this close up on his wife's face, and she's devastated. This woman, this little girl is dead. And then it's like, okay, on to the next. And it was like, why is this in here?
I think that maybe the editing could have been a little bit smoother. It had there, because this is a TV movie. They could. It's not that this movie is 117 minutes long or however long it was. It had to be that long because you have to count for commercials and stuff like that. So whatever schedule they had, it was or process they had, it was really tight. It's not like nowadays where you're watching an episode of Andor, and some episodes are 30 minutes and some episodes are 45 minutes. It's like every episodes have to be exactly this number of minutes, and you could not deviate from it. So sometimes you have to make some hard choices. And I think that may have been one of the hard choices they made that maybe wasn't as smooth as maybe they had wanted it to be. I think one of the reasons why I believe that this was a movie is because normally you only play a TV movie once and you never see it again. There were no replays on a TV movie. So if you miss it, it was gone forever. And then maybe 20 years down the line, you would see the DVD of that particular TV movie or the video cassette. But Brian's song seemed to be always available. We saw it in our classroom. The movie came out in 1971. I think I must have been in middle school. It could have been high school, but I doubt it. But it was in middle. I'm sure it was in middle school. It could have been elementary school. So this is long after the movie had transitioned to whatever other medium. And I don't remember I guess there were video cassette players. I guess they had schools that could afford video cassette players. But yeah, we watched it at school, and I was like, oh my goodness, because normally when I was growing up, they had the actual film reels. Like, so when you had to watch a movie, you were watching. They would
bring out the projector.
Yeah, you have a reel-to-reel projector. So, but I think I remember watching this on a VCR, and it's like, oh, and it's like, kids, you got to watch this. And so,
bring some tissues, kids.
Right.
Heavy today.
And the reason that we were made to watch it is because this movie was so important to race relations.
But for some reason, I don't know why, but I was always conflating this as the movie that started AA. I think I'm confused.
Yeah, you're definitely confusing
the two of them. But when people,
unless you saw director's cut that we didn't.
No, there's not. But I'm just when Zoe had sent us the list, and I was like, oh, Brian's song or whatever. I really was thinking that was the one that tackled like AA and starting AA, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. James Caan has cancer. This is not the AA.
Right.
Which is funny because when you had suggested this one, and it was kind of in the back of my mind because I almost watched it earlier this year when Khan passed away and always had that connection with my grandfather. So when you said it, I was just like, you know what, forget my other suggestions. This is a film this is the perfect time to finally see it. So it's funny that you thought it was that one. Even I at least knew it was the one where Khan gets cancer.
Right. And also,
Yeah.
I think if they were going to do a movie about AA, it might have something to do with Betty Ford and the Betty Ford Clinic.
Yeah.
Well, so the one I was thinking about is My Name is Bill W.
Okay.
Well, Bill Bryan, I can
Bill Bryan, yeah.
The bees. I get where you got there.
Work with me. This
Right,
Betty Ford
right.
also
It's a
has a
common
bee.
mistake.
The bees are all over.
Oh my goodness.
One of the things. I'll go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Zoe, what were your favorite parts, or have we already talked about all of them?
No, we're just getting started. So I noticed that not really a part, just a detail I noticed that the characters were wearing, at least at some parts, they were wearing the lacrosse shirts with the little alligator on it. So,
yes. And Bernie Casey has a penguin shirt too.
I've
And
seen the penguin shirts. I'm not familiar with the penguin shirts, but I remember growing up, everybody wanted the lacrosse shirts. Like everybody who could afford them would wear them. And I never really realized the significance of them. Do you guys know the significance of the lacrosse shirts?
I do not.
I remember them being Izods. So it was always like, I want an Izod.
Right.
I want an Izod with that alligator. But it was more like, I mean, that was one of the first luxury sports brands, I guess.
Right. So lacrosse, that was it was a black tennis player. I think he was a French tennis player, and he's became very successful, and he's very skilled, and he decided to start his clothing brand, and I think his nickname was the crocodile or something like that. So when he came out with the shirts, he had the little crocodile symbol, and it was lacrosse or lacroc or whatever the name of the shirts were. And I know I always wanted one but could never afford it. Or my mom could never afford it because I wasn't buying anything at that age.
I just Googled it. So I did the Goog.
And right. You gave it a Goog.
The tennis player's name is Rene Lacoste. And yes, he was indeed a tennis player and started it. Yeah. Lacoste is still around, as is Penguin. These glasses were actually from the Penguin Company. So
okay.
Yeah, these are classic brands, actually.
I don't think these are penguins, but I know I've had penguin glasses in the past, but I forget what brand these are.
Yeah. The ones I'm wearing, I forgot the name, but they were on sale and I got them online. So
I like them. They're stylish.
I know. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm fighting against I'm on a one-man crusade against Luxottica. So I try to buy other brands that are not associated with them. So this is part of that. So anyways, but like you, I truly enjoyed the bonding between the two men and how it happened immediately. And what that did was I liked how it brought about basically getting it on Piccolo's side. It basically helped him to take his career more seriously, I guess. And for Sawyer's, it helped him to open up. Because remember, they had that first speech. This is another of my favorite parts. He's rehearsing his speech over, and he got this award. He's rehearsing his speech over and over again. And when he gets up, all he can say is, "I don't deserve it. Thank you."
Yeah.
And then he cuts to Piccolo, and he's just like
he shreds
his hands
the
up,
speech, right?
Yeah. I was mouthing the words as he was like standing there.
Right.
I was like, football is a team sport. Yeah.
Right. All the things he wanted to say. And that's one of my favorite parts because that's me. That's me to a T. Like I get up in front of people. At least that's the way I was at the time that I watched the movie. Now I feel like if I got in front of some people, I could probably say some lines or whatever, read a speech. See, his thing was, for whatever reason, he decided he wanted to memorize it and recite the speech when really he should have just taken the speech with him because it was written down. Why not take it with you?
And it's expected when you're accepting a speech like that. It's perfectly reasonable to have the notes with you. It's not you're not giving a presentation. So.
Right. So yeah, but I was like that, super shy, couldn't barely talk in front of people, and he was kind of the same way. And then as his relationship with Piccolo developed, he's able to open up more and more. But I think a lot of that also has it was Piccolo also having been injured and having been sick, and that also brought out basically strengthened Sawyer to be able to speak out in front of his peers. And hold on. Oh, there was one line. This is after Piccolo. I think it was after he was sick. No, this is before he got sick. So he asked Sawyer, Piccolo asked Sawyer, do you think when you start running, do you think about anything? And Sawyer says, no, I just start running. I don't think about anything. And then that's when Piccolo says, you want to start thinking? Because I want to play some too.
Yes. Yeah.
So-
I loved that, you know, and I don't think the screenplay really spells it out, because again, it's such a short film and they're really just, you know, trying to touch like the high points in the chemistry. But I loved how they were both competitive, but they both respected each other and wanted to bring out the best in each other, rather than, you know, like pull a Nancy Kerrigan and like, you know, hurt him and then be like, haha, now I can start, not you. I think they, again, it's not spelled out, but I feel like you get the sense that they both understood, you know, he's black, he's white. This is going to be an important thing for both of us, either way that this goes. So we both need to bring our A game. And I thought that was really touching.
Yeah. I mean, you rarely see football players on the same team try to sabotage each other. At least I should hope that is the truth. I've never been on a team sport, but I imagine that they wouldn't try to, you know, you would break your running back's legs. That would
Well, I mean, listen,
if you want that spot, I guess. But yeah,
I got to tell you, all the little CW shows I watch about sports, they're all after each other. They're
Right.
all after each other. So.
Right. So that's it. Basically, it's very good. I like the fact that it was very good at manipulating my emotions without being obvious about it. And I knew this was going to happen. I've seen this movie before, and yet it's still impactful because everything felt so natural. I think it helps that like the story pulls from actual events, and I think they was able to draw out the realism from the real events that happened. Now, obviously, they must have made some artistic license. One of the things that I couldn't find in the trivia were things that were like totally false, like verifiably fake or, you know, fraudulent or something like you find with a lot of true life events. Or they say that they don't even like to say that it's based on a true story. Now they say it's inspired by true events or something like that. They move further and further away from the claim that whatever they're playing is real. But
I feel like there was a lot of that like I saw The Blind Side, and like everybody else, I fell in love with it, and I loved, you know, the characters and Sandra Bullock, and then all of a sudden it was like, that's not how it was. Here's how it really was. And I was like, don't tell me, because you're going to ruin the movie. I don't want to hear how it really was.
Right.
Just let me have my movie. Thank you.
And I've become like so much where I just expect it to be so different that I'm just like, look, I'm accepting this as the story, the movie version, and I'll accept whatever they tell me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with The Blind Side, they were saying that the football player actually knew how to play football. That was the biggest thing that they had changed in the true life version. I mean, in the movie version, that was different from true life. It's like he didn't have to be taught how to play football. He knew how to play football. He was okay.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find anything like that. And it's maybe because they didn't have the rumor mill maybe wasn't strong enough or whatever. There was only a couple of things that was like a little bit different from actual events. Some things that were edited out for the sensitive ears of adults, I guess. Certain things that they didn't want to say on television. The N word is okay to say on television, but other words apparently were not okay, and they didn't say those words. That the overall movie, the course of the movie, the pacing of the movie was, because when I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's only an hour and 15 minutes. This is cool. I could do this and get some other things done. And then when I turned it on, I was like, whoa, the aspect ratio is really bad.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought was, Man, were they doing some Zack Snyder stuff? Was this something where Zack Snyder felt like, well, I can only shoot it in this aspect ratio because of IMAX? It's like, well, IMAX theaters have a wider aspect ratio nowadays. You
Exactly.
don't have to shoot it like that. Doesn't have
Yeah,
to
no,
shoot.
this was the old television 181,
Right.
or
Right.
Justin, you and I just discussed this today, the Academy ratio.
Yes.
Is that what
Quote,
they call
unquote.
it?
Yes.
Erroneously, they call it.
Yeah. Nothing Academy about that small box.
Right.
Just the fact that you watched the Academy Awards on a small box for so many years.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I enjoyed being hurt, as Nicole Kidman is saying to us now. This is a great place to get your heart broken, or something to that nature.
Something like that. Yeah.
What I'll say too was I knew going in that it was going to be a tearjerker, so I was bracing for that moment. It happens obviously at the end, but I wasn't expecting it to hit me really hard twice, because when Sayers has to announce to the teammates that Piccolo has cancer, that put a big lump in my throat, because they let that be very quiet and tender. Williams conveyed that, especially for him, he is a very quiet person, but he feels this is something very personal. I should tell everyone. And just, oh man, that was kind of like, why did people not warn me about that scene? Everybody warns me about the end, but they didn't warn me about that scene.
Right. Yeah.
And then they do it to us again when, it's like, he needs a second surgery, and the wife is like, I don't want to tell him. And then he's in there, and then he's like, the doctor comes in and says, no one's talked to you. And then like Bernie Casey's like, or not Bernie Casey, I'm sorry. Billy D. Williams is like, oh boy, now I have to tell him or whatever, So it's like it's like, okay, stop being tender. Like, just let him know. I'm sure he would want to know these things,
And even just that, when he has to take the doctor aside and just kind of like explain to him, like, yeah, come back for a signature. And thankfully I've never been in that heavy of a situation, but I did work at a retirement home that was also acting as therapy. So knowing those, having to get signatures, you realize there are times it's like, yeah, I'm coming back for this signature, depending on what the moment is. You have to have that kind of patience and understanding with people, but you can also get lost in it is a job to you. So, but yeah.
And I also love the acting, that it was just outstanding. You can see they were destined for great things, because it's like, especially I had never seen Billy D. Williams like that, like as the shy guy, the guy that couldn't speak, the guy that's giving the speech in front of his team, and is like breaking down as he's giving the speech. I had never seen him like that. So, and then I never seen James Caan, as basically as like Ryan Reynolds, except with a Southern accent. I never seen that part of him. I never seen him act that way, and I didn't expect the slight unnecessary twang in his accent. So I was like, oh man, it's like a different version of James Caan, because normally he's like, I think ever since The Godfather, he's just played that wise guy persona. He's just, maybe in Misery he kind of pulled it in a little bit, but for the most part, it's just that wise guy. One of my favorite performances is when he did Alienation. That's one of my favorite movies, and it really works in that movie. But seeing this movie, you find out, well, he didn't have to do that. He could have been any character he wanted to, but he just but that's what people want to see. That people want to see James Caan with shades of The Godfather, and that's what he gives them, and he's very good at that. And the last thing I say, I love that theme song. I love that music. That was just awesome.
Yeah. Caan famously hated making Alienation.
Yeah. He didn't like the director so much.
He didn't appreciate the director, and
it was something about, somebody asked him about that, and he was like, you gotta ask me about that fucking movie.
He's like, you're gonna bring this up now.
Right. But to his credit, he recognizes that people love that movie. It spawned a TV show that only lasted one season, and several TV movies, and I like 6 TV movies after the TV show. So people really love the world that they built. And so I think his problem was mainly dealing with the director, and maybe probably because the director was inexperienced, and I don't think that director did too many movies after Alienation. But still, I love his performance in that movie, and I love that movie. I think in better hands, it could have been a better movie, obviously, but still, it was good enough for me, I guess.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, because like you said, it got even though short-lived series, it's still they kept going back to it with the TV movies. So
In a way, it presaged like District 9, you know, the whole
oh yeah.
sci-fi allegory for like immigration and stuff like that. Yeah. Kind of cool. I
Yeah.
like that movie.
Yeah, with that, what I didn't realize, I knew that it was an allegory for immigration, but I didn't realize it was an allegory for Chinese immigrants. We're always thinking about like Latinx immigrants, but this was specifically because it was Los Angeles. It was supposed to be an allegory for Chinese immigrants or Japanese immigrants, and it was just a fun movie to watch. So yeah, I had to cut myself off because I'll start talking about that for a
You'll
couple
keep talking
hours.
about Alienation. Well, you'll have
That's
to
us to a T.
on for an
We still did that
Alienation. Right, I
today.
know.
I'll go off on a tangent. Were there any other favorite parts of this movie that you guys want to talk about?
You know what? I did really like the scene where Sayers, like they bring him in, the coach and Bernie and them to tell him that, you know, he's going to be rooming with Piccolo. And they're expecting this like big break, and he just laughs it off because he's like, I thought it was like I'm getting cut or something.
Right.
And like, but then you get that moment where it's like, no, you got to realize why this is going to be such a big deal. And then you cut to like when Khan finds out, when Brian does, and you almost feel for a split second because he seems a little miffed that you're like, uh-oh. But then you realize it's just more or less him being like, well, I just wasn't told. Like he was more just upset that it's like, why didn't somebody tell me?
Right.
And I have to find out this way, which is completely reasonable. I would be the same way if I wasn't told.
I think he kind of knows is like one of the things is that he's kind of that competition between him and Sawyer is like they're both playing the same position. And they're both competing to be like the number one spot on that position. And so with them talking to Sawyers instead of him, it's almost like they're acknowledging that he's the better player. But it's less about that and more like he has to carry the burden of because Piccolo is not going to suffer as much blowback as Sawyer might, you know.
Right.
So he was being leaned on in that way. But yeah, that was a fantastic scene. I like that. All right. So we've talked about our favorite parts, and we're going to transition and talk about what the trivia, the behind the scenes. We're going to take a look under the hood of this movie. So gonna play a little tune, maybe a little message. I don't know what we're doing. I'll fix everything after post. And but right now, while we're recording, I'm just gonna play it too. All right, so now we're going to talk about trivia. Why don't one of you? I think that's you, Justin. I think you get to start us off.
This one I actually really like because I didn't notice this, but now that I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, that does check out. So the interior of Gail Sawyer's house was the interior set of Darren Samantha's house from Bewitched. This film aired during the show's 8th and final season, one day before the episode The Warlock and the Gray Flannel Suit. And now that I'm reading this, yeah, I totally see it. When I'm thinking back to that scene in the house, I can definitely see how they shot it a little bit differently, thankfully. So it still feels unique to itself, but yeah, 100% imagining that now.
Yeah, it's not, it wasn't just that, it was the lighting and everything. They must have redressed it significantly because I didn't recognize it at all. But then again, I hadn't watched a lot of Bewitched.
And I'm pretty sure there's not an episode where she gets a weight room down in the basement. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
but I think that helped too.
So, having played football in high school, James Caan was a more accomplished athlete than Billy D. Williams in the film. Gail Sawyers is supposed to surpass Brian Piccolo in speed and playing abilities. So Caan was forced to slow down considerably so that Williams could believably outplay him. So, yeah, of course, that's naturally.
Caan initially turned down the role of Piccolo, preferring to focus on his film career, but he liked the script so much that he eventually relented. Yeah. Good for him, though. It was a good choice.
Yeah, I think actually, like you said earlier, so that helped with his transition because this ended up being such a big hit on TV circuits that gave him more name recognition, I feel, going after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and on the go ahead, because you got the flip side of this.
Yeah, I was going to say on the flip side, Louis Gossett Jr. was originally cast as Gale Sawyers. A few days before shooting began, Gossett tore his Achilles tendon while working out. Studio executives quickly hired Billy D. Williams as a replacement, leaving Gossett depressed over missing his shot. Producer David L. Wolper promised Gossett the first great role that came along. Wolper cast Gossett as Fiddler in Roots, the Emmy-winning role that made him a star. So I really like how that ended up working out for all involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that almost never works out. You
I
miss your
know.
shot, it is gone, and you're going to be playing
Yeah.
community theater for the rest of your life.
Oh, no, don't say that. Don't say that. A good part will eventually come along, but usually missing one, the next project is not as great.
Right. But it worked out great for him, so I'm happy about that. So while it was not mentioned in the film for reasons of delicacy on primetime TV, Brian Piccolo had a metastasized version of testicular cancer. Testicle was a censored word. He underwent multiple extremely painful surgeries that, among other things, included a mastectomy, the removal of a chest wall, and then, oh, this is a good word.
Orchiectomy.
Thank you.
Orchiectomy.
Orchiectomy. The removal of the testicle. This hasn't happened to you. Is that why you're pronouncing it so well?
No, I think I took
confessional time.
I took 4 years of Latin, and I'm pretty sure that
okay.
Orchiae or something like that. Like I think it means like egg.
Right. Okay.
Okay. For a second there, I was like, wait a minute, is there a big spot on testicular cancer when you're learning Latin? That's a
no.
No.
But all the medical terms come from Latin.
Right.
So.
All the medical
that makes
terms.
sense. Yeah.
Most scientific terms come from Latin.
That makes more sense.
So the surgeon was later described as being too gung-ho because at the time, and with the cancer at such an advanced level, there was nothing that could be actually done. And the best thing that should have been focused on was quality of life, as Brian's chances were virtually zero. In 1974, a doctor named Larry Enhorn developed a regimen that had a dramatic impact on this form of cancer. For someone in Brian's condition, it would have given him a 70% chance of survival. For someone whose testicular cancer had not metastasized, the success rate was 99%. Today, that form of cancer, when caught at the right stage, is the most treatable form of cancer. So, yeah, Piccolo just got it at the wrong. Any time before 1974 was the wrong time, and he had gotten it in the mid 1960s. So, yeah, that's tough.
That's really heartbreaking, actually, to know how close he was, especially when you hear that success rate after, if you
after the treatment. And also another thing about it is that you notice they only refer to it as a cancer or something that he had and it kind of gotten worse, but they never named it, and and now we know why.
Though, you know what? That's a case of the very quick pace working as well, because when you're watching the film, you're not really thinking of it because it's just moving so quickly.
Right.
And I was wrong. It comes from the Greek for orchis, and the modern Latin is orchido, which does not mean egg. It means testicle.
Well, it's like an egg. You were closer than I would have been. So.
Right.
So there you go. Okay. Sayers always referred to Piccolo as Pick, while Piccolo referred to Sayers as Black Magic.
Yeah, I picked up on that during the movie.
Although he only calls him Black Magic like once or twice. Most of the time it's magic this, magic that.
It's just magic, right?
Probably rolls off the tongue a little bit better to.
Also, how can they say the N-word on TV and not testicle?
Yeah,
it was 1970.
That is exactly what I was going to point out.
Yeah,
and it depends on the context. Like what I'm not saying that it wasn't as offensive, but you did hear it a lot more, and there were a lot of Black TV shows that would have it every once in a while. It would come out. I remember this famous episode. There was a show called "Give Me a Break," and they used that word, but it was meant to be used as an insult, and it was like one of those very special episodes, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
So Joey Lawrence was dressed up in blackface, and he had to have a talking to with Nell. So yeah, that was indeed a powerful episode. And so the word was meant to be impactful. So yeah, but that was it. They would sling it around, and now it's not particularly acceptable anymore.
Yep. Whereas we can say testicle all we want on TV.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, we
yeah,
finally
and a lot
graduated.
worse.
I don't know, because there was a 2001 remake of this that I had no idea about until
I
after.
didn't know either. I was afraid when I found out. I was afraid you was going to watch that one. I was like, oh no, because that had happened
Yeah,
before.
I almost thought of it, but then I was like, I've never heard anybody talk about this, and I'm almost certain we mean the original. So I'm just watching the original. It's a weird thing, but now I'm kind of curious. Like, I think by 2001 they probably could have said it was testicular cancer, but even then I don't know, because when it comes to anything sexual, for a long time, especially for TV, was very, very prudish. So even if it's not a sexual matter like it is here, that's still that, don't bring it up. And it's very jarring when you can't say that, but you can say the N word, even if it had a purpose.
I'm pretty sure
Justin,
by 2001 they could say it.
Oh yeah. So Justin, remember how I told you I didn't know anybody in that 2001 version?
Yeah,
I was completely wrong. Mekhi Phifer is in it, and the lead is Sean Mayer, who was in Firefly, the television show, and then Serenity.
Yeah, I recognize both of them. I was like, oh wow, that's why I kind of want to watch it, just because Mekhi Phifer is in it. But I am not convinced that it'll be as good,
especially because you never hear about it. Like, somehow
not.
I never heard about this.
Right. Especially when you never hear about it. The only thing that I like about it from watching the preview is that they're closer in age to the actual athletes, because when you see the show, when the show opens up, the original James Caan, you could tell is every bit of 30 years old. I was like, oh God. It's like when I found out, like, actually, so what happened was, after I watched the show, I did some Google searches and I went to Wikipedia on both of the athletes, and so Piccolo dies at 26 years old. I was like, oh my God, James Caan is not 26 years old.
No.
He's every bit as 30. And
this is like the reverse of Beverly Hills 90210, where like 30-year-olds are playing high schoolers.
Right.
Yeah. But he's like, I'm a rookie, and he looks 30.
Right.
How long have you been a rookie for?
Right. It's been a rookie for 5 years. All right,
it is interesting that you brought up about the ages, because Sayers did want to actually play himself, but Bear's training camp conflicted with shooting. So it's very interesting to think about that.
I am glad they didn't do that. I'm not convinced that he would have been able to do that effectively. I mean, yes, you lived through it, but at the same time, you're not actually an actor. Right.
Exactly. It's the same as putting a camera on somebody, even if they're being themselves, and they get that shell shock of or that's perfectly him going up on the stage. It's a different format.
When people say, like, about certain actors, like, oh, he's just acting like himself, it's like, well, that's still a skill, right?
Exactly. It's still not easy to pull off.
Right.
You still have to have a comfortability with yourself and the role and the camera,
right? And not only that, but if he's acting like himself, then that is why the casting director chose him, because that they wanted him, and they know that the audience connects with him, so they don't care if he doesn't have range. They know that that's what the audience want, or that's the characteristic that they want that character to want. Sometimes casting director does half of the work for the actor, right?
That's nothing new. Like, people went to a Humphrey Bogart movie because they wanted to see Bogart.
They wanted to see Bogart do his thing where he's like, get out of here, sweetheart.
I think I've rarely seen it where, there's a movie about somebody that that the audience at large knows about, and then has to see that story again. That rarely works. But I'm thinking of 3:15 to Paris, with directed by Clint Eastwood, about the guys that take the train hijackers. And he actually cast the real people in it. But I think that works because we don't know who those people are. And so in a way, it was getting to know them. Sure, they weren't the best actors, but it worked there. But I think if you had cast the real person here, it would give it a weird sheen.
Almost too distracting.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So after its successful television broadcast on ABC, the film was released theatrically in Europe. So it fits this podcast. I can claim it as my own.
Dick Butkus made his acting debut in this film, playing himself in an uncredited role. I don't remember seeing Dick Butkus, but
I don't remember him
Neither
seeing
do
him.
I. And
I think
but
I
you know
remember
who he
somebody
is.
mentioned his name, but I don't remember seeing him.
Well, I think a lot of the quote unquote Chicago Bears were the Chicago Bears at the time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have known that,
Right,
had I
right.
not read the cast list. So
I think that it must have been he was just passing and they greeted him in passing. I think that's what happened.
yeah.
Yeah, and so to transition there, scenes of the Chicago Bears training camp in the film were shot at the camp's location, and give this my best shot, Rensselaer, Indiana, on the campus of St. Joseph's College. Most of the filming was done at the end of summer before the start of the fall semester in the August heat. I do not envy them. Sayers' Corvette could be spotted around campus with the license plates GS40.
Yes, that's a brilliant license plate. Michael Legrand's. Oh, you said Miguel. What did you say his name was? Miguel.
Oh, I said Michel Legrand.
Michel. Okay.
I think he's French. I think.
Right. Most likely. I'm probably still butchering the last name. So Michel Legrand title thing. Oh, so I'm reading this all wrong because it's apostrophe S. Let me start again. Michel Legrand's title theme found life beyond the film that inspired it. At the time, it was very unusual for a theme song from a made-for-TV movie to hit the pop charts because a network film would, in theory, be only shown once. However, Brian's song was such a ratings bonanza that the heart-wrenching theme song was heard by millions of viewers the night of the film premiered and was much hummed in the weeks and months that followed. Speaking of much hummed, there's this movie that I just saw called what's it called? It's called Don't Worry, Darling.
Yes.
Am I
Oh,
saying
yeah.
that right?
Yep.
Have you seen that one yet?
I did.
Justin has. I have not.
There is humming in that movie. I'll just leave it at that. So
yes,
to continue,
I know exactly what you're referencing.
There was not enough background music in the film to justify a long playing soundtrack album. So Legrand recorded Brian's song theme and variations, which also included selections from a host of many other film projects. Bell Records, which released the album, concurrently issued a 45 RPM single of Brian's song. I don't know what you guys know about records, but there was the small records that they call the 45, and then there was the bigger regular size records. So the 45, I think that's revolution per minute. That was the smaller that's what we would call a single today.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a stack of them that I found at a thrift store a while ago. I do like collecting the 45s because it almost makes you feel like it almost makes you feel like a radio DJ because instead of having to like find the spot, you can just be like, all right, and next we're playing Jane by Jefferson Starship, and I could just, plop it on and easily get it going.
Weren't those the ones that you needed the little plastic thing to put in?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
You need to put the little plastic thing under to play it on a record, regular
the adapter.
Player.
Yeah.
Right. So this song, Brian's song, was back with on the B side was Legrand's theme from The Go-Between. And the single would go on to top the music charts for the remainder of the year. Incredibly, the theme from Brian's song was so iconic that it was incorporated again 30 years later in the 2001 TV remake. Why would you use another song? That would be dumb. I would want to kill somebody if they tried to remake Brian's song without the Brian song theme. That's bad. That's bad. No, you don't do that. Who would do that? That would have been. It's like I remember when watching Battlestar Galactica, the remake TV series, and then didn't use the theme, and I wasn't disappointed. But at the very last episode, they incorporated some of the original theme music in the show, and it just gave me the warm and fuzzies. You gotta include the theme music. At some point, you can't just let it go like that.
Brian Piccolo's last words were, "Can you believe it, Joy? Can you believe this shit?"
Yeah, they almost had it
there.
They almost had that in the movie. Oh, here's a funny thing that happens, right? So, his voice is very faint when his wife is by his bedside. She can barely hear him when he's saying that, and I couldn't hear what he said, and I'm already emotionally distraught. But it's like, okay, I've already gone through the emotions. I'm fine. And then I rewound it and turned the closed caption on and watched it again so I could see what he said. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I'm crying all over again. It's worse now because now I know what he says and it's heart-wrenching. But in the movie, he says, can you believe it? No, she says, I love you. And he says, who'd have thought? Who would have believed it? Who would have believed it?
Oh,
And so
Yeah.
that's heart-wrenching.
now I'm getting misty-eyed
Right,
again.
so there you go.
And like we mentioned earlier, Piccolo is 21 years old at the outset of the film's narrative, while James Caan was actually 30, and it was noticeable.
Right.
Despite how great Caan is in the film.
As evidenced throughout the movie, Piccolo's favorite food was pizza.
Yay, pizza. I love
Woo!
pizza.
Also my favorite.
Pizza.
James Caan utilizes a noticeable Southern inflection in his portrayal of Brian Piccolo, when in fact, Piccolo hailed from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is not in the South.
Right, not in the South. He probably wouldn't have had that accent. So that was a very strange choice for the actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to know why. I mean, you know, obviously the 70s were a different time where like the original writer probably would not have been allowed on the set or what have you, but like couldn't somebody after seeing a daily be like, wait a minute, Piccolo never had a Southern accent, tell Caan to cut it out.
Right. I feel like I think Caan would have known because remember he played football when he was in school, and I feel like he, you know, if you're playing football, you're normally a football fan. So I feel like he would have known. He would have known about Piccolo because Piccolo was a big deal at that time when he was coming up. So it seems to me that he would have known about Piccolo, especially since Piccolo was a big star in college as a college football player. So it seems to me that he would have known, and yet that was his choice. And so that's strange, but as long as you don't know this little bit tidbit, it works.
It works, yeah.
And then when you find out, just like it'll leave you scratching your head for a while. It's like, why but you know, it's just a little tidbit, you know it, and then you can move on with your life. All right, that's it for the trivia. And now we're going to see what the critics thought.
Are you good for me just to go right in, or is
what? Before you go right in, let me just mention that the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, they gave it a 92%. The audience gave it an 82%, and on IMDb reviews, it has a 7.5 out of 10. So yeah, so let's see. The funny thing is that normally with normal films, there's a boatload of, you know, critical blurbs on Rotten Tomatoes, but there were hardly any actual blurbs for this particular TV movie. So I grabbed all of them. These are all of the ones that were kind of written down on Rotten Tomatoes that were from the professional critics. So yeah, now you can go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah. So the first one is from John J. O'Connor, who was writing for the New York Times. And he said, on its own, somewhat obvious level, Brian's song worked. Not least in its favor were two exceptionally fine performances. James Caan as Brian Piccolo and Billy D. Williams as Gale Sayers. And then we also had Pat Graham of the Chicago Reader stating, made for TV eyewash for disheartened Bears fans to drown their sorrows in, which definitely is saying something to say drown your sorrows in.
Right. Yeah. Film. So this guy, this is the single Rotten Tomato that I found his particular review, and it feels so wrong. It's like he's saying this out of spite. It's like it
just sounds like he's not a Bears fan, and
right.
Movie on that basis.
It's like
alone.
you don't have to be a Bears fan for this to affect you. This will affect you. Now, this movie is for everybody. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing to say. But the first review,
Pat Graham, somebody dies from cancer. Have a heart.
Jesus. Right. Absolutely. But I felt like O'Connor had the right of it. From what he's written, I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. And so Brad Liedman from Film Threat, he wrote, it remains the best example of the most different of men competing fairly and getting along peacefully ever filmed. Yeah, I guess
that's really polite.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, it's not wrong, but it's a very weird way of phrasing.
It is very. It's kind of a weird way of speaking.
Not a threat at all.
Right. And then Neil Minow from Common Sense Media wrote, "Weepy story of interracial pro football teammates." That was actually a Fresh Tomatoes. It was kind of a weird way of writing that too.
That's just a synopsis. It's not really a review, but
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure.
yes,
Thanks, Neil.
It's true that it was a weepy story, and it works as a weepy story. Interracial pro football players. Yeah, that's you're good. You
I think he and
described the
Pat
story.
Graham need to hang out and
yeah.
console each other.
It's like somebody forced him to watch this movie. He's like, all right.
Right.
And he maliciously complied. It's like, you're gonna write a review of this movie. He's like, fine, I'll do it.
Fine, here's my 250 words.
Right.
Jeff Westoff from the Northwest Herald in Crystal Lake, Illinois. The film's emotions are obvious and blunt, but they get the job done. Okay, was that a rotten?
I think the rest of these are fresh. And
they're still
yeah. And it's like,
that sounds rotten.
Yeah, it sounds rotten.
Almost.
And it's true, but at the same time, it's did it affect you? Were you crying at the end of the movie? I mean, if you're crying at the end of the movie, then the movie did its job. And it's like, you can't be mad at the movie. You can't be mad at a tearjerker for actually making you cry.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So that's it. Finally, Brian's song is, as this recording, available for purchase at your favorite streaming service. That's it for today. Please join us next week where we have the return of special guest host Beth from the Made for TV Movie podcast. As promised, I would watch, at her insistence, The Lost Boys.
Oh, do you not like The Lost Boys?
No, I've never seen The Lost Boys.
You're in for a treat.
Now
my
I've
friend.
So good.
I finally have to get around to watching it because
it's good.
And I have the DVDs and everything. I just hadn't started to watch it yet. So now we get to watch it.
You know what? We all have those, and I'm honestly envious that it gets to be a first time watch for you.
So
that cassette lived in my radio boombox for 6 months. It was all I ever played. That soundtrack. It's so good.
Sister. Sorry, I'm starting to sing it now.
People are strange. And then Timmy Capello and his like sax.
Yes.
I still believe.
Oh, just wait till you get to the sax.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. You're absolutely gonna love it.
All right, then. I'm excited. So follow us on Twitter, TikTok at Backlick Cinema, or on Facebook or Instagram at Backlick Cinema Podcast for updates. Don't forget that you can contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Do you have any plugs? I know you have a website. Do you have some social medias you want to plug? What you got for me?
Justin?
I was going to pass this one to you, Jose.
Okay, so I was going to say, at least social media wise, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Watch Skip Plus is normally how you'd be able to find us. And then our podcast website is at anchor.fm/watch-skip. That's how you will find us. And then based on being on Anchor, we are also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music. Justin, am I missing anything?
No, I'm also looking at the list and we are correct. We got them all now.
Okay.
I think we're getting used to knowing where they're all at.
So
absolutely.
You're on most of them. You're also on Pocket Cast, which I am grateful for because that's the player that I use. So yeah, so you're pretty much available wherever people listen.
Wherever people get their podcasts.
Right, absolutely. So
wherever videos are sold.
Right. Once again, gentlemen, thank you. I really appreciate both of you. I normally don't like, especially if there's a podcast with more than one host, I usually get just the one, but I'm grateful that both of you could join me and I really appreciate your presence. I hope that we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having. Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. Once again, I was able to do this without turning into a monster. So one last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can subscribe to the show, rate us, or write a review on Spotify, podchaser.com, or Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. And we know you've enjoyed our guest, Jose, also known as Cupcake, and Justin, also known as the Cinemasochist. So please find them at their podcast, Skip, Watch, Plus. And Justin is a frequent guest on Nana Bomb Podcast. You can find those shows wherever you listen to podcasts. Believe me, it matters. Be safe. Share a movie from yesteryear with your family. Hug your loved ones. And if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.